Hi, welcome to this Open Security Summit session in February 2023. We're going to be talking about SOAR, which is a very key topic these days, about secure orchestration, automation, and response. And I'm joining via Venkat, Pratibha, and Nick. So I'm Dinis Cruz. I'm the chief scientist at Glasswall, also the CISO at Holland & Barrett. So I really care about automation. It's definitely something I try to push more and more. I've done a lot of automation in the past, and I think there's a great conversion, right, about these two worlds. So maybe Nick, quick introduction to you, and then.
Hi, Nick Harris, Deputy CISO, Head of Cybersecurity here at Holland & Barrett, so work very closely with Dinis. Been here 6 weeks, quite a degree of automation experience in the past around phish response and handling and certain other aspects, and yeah, great. Loads of good discussions to be had this afternoon.
Cool. Pratibha, quick intro from you.
I'm handling, I've been in Secura for Secure is a SOAR platform that we have developed. And I'm the co-founder and CTO for Secure. I've been working with the product since last 4 years now in the same domain.
Cool. And Venkat?
Yeah, I'm Venkat, and I'm the founder of Flexible IR. For the last 5 years, I've been primarily developing playbooks for incident response, and followed by conducting drills for these using these playbooks. Primarily, I've been developing tool chains for companies like Sun Microsystems, Intel, and Yahoo.
Cool. So why don't we start by maybe just a bit of definition? Right? What's your views? What's SOAR? Right? How do you see it? How we would define it?
So for me, SOAR is something which is supposed to make the life of an analyst easier, right? There are a lot of duplicate bugs. There are a lot of false positives. There is a lot of data. There is a lot of categorically, there are a lot of different tools which are currently available in market. And as an analyst, it is very difficult for me to understand and start working and understand the console of all those different platforms, right? So a SOAR product first is supposed to give analyst a single workbench wherein he can, he can speak with all these different technologies, different category of tools. That's number one. And then because it is orchestrating with the different log sources, so it helps an analyst to look into a particular alert along with the enriched information that is available around that alert, and then helping him to execute or to triage or to respond to this alert once and when this is ingested in his platform. That's one part of it, right? On top of this, I believe there are so many manual operations that as an analyst or as a SOC team, they perform in their day-to-day lives. For example, a very simple basic thing can be if you're working on an MSS kind of an environment, you have multiple tenants, you have multiple clients, and say you have to send a report to one of your clients every fortnight, which includes the high critical or medium severity bugs, right? So you will be doing certain manual things on your SIM tool, and then will be doing this. With any SOAR platform, this can be automated. So you can generate a report for as per your requirements and do that. You can generate dashboard. It is generally SOAR platforms are not just pulling the data from the third-party sources, they are also pushing certain data. So because the tool is capable of pushing and pulling the data from all these different set of tools with which it is integrated, there are a lot of activities that can be automated, and hence, so for example, this was just a one simple thing, right? Say you have to generate, again, as I mentioned that You have to generate a report for one of your customers, right? So if as an analyst for this particular kind of work, you're spending 3 hours in 1 month, that means that in an entire year, you're spending, and this will be done within minutes, right? This will be done within a single minute if you're using any SOAR platform. So if we look at the time that a SOAR platform will reduce for all these different automation, different manual operations, it is drastic. Generally, and then there are playbooks, obviously, and with playbooks you can automate a lot of different things. You can keep on updating your firewalls, you can keep on updating your systems automatically, you can do a user enrichment, you can do a user logins, or kind of enrollment as and when they are getting created inside your system. So there are a lot of things. It is not just an orchestration platform which will just communicate with all the different devices in your infrastructure. It is also going to make your life actually easier by giving you a single pane of glass, a single console, wherein you can communicate with all these different tools. You don't have to learn all of them. You just have to learn one tool. And then eventually it will drastically improve on the efficiency of the way you are currently performing inside your SOC.
I know. Nick, you want to add?
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of those points. I see a SOAR is a from my perspective anyway, is a subset of a wider automation drive. We can automate many things, but for me, SOAR is about automating the responsive side of cybersecurity to be ultimately be more efficient and more effective, faster. So can we take the menial tasks away from the analyst, the very repetitive ones, the boring ones that degrade retention, and allow them to focus on the more interesting, the threat hunting? And can we do things faster than a human? And can we do things, particularly when it comes down to cost, out of hours? So if we've got good logs and we've set up the playbooks in the right way to act on those logs, consume different products and the enrichment of those incidents along with threat intelligence, run the playbooks through and get to an action. So you've got all those you've got the trigger, all the inputs, and you've got an action off the back that auto contains, resolves an issue, responds to a user, throws out an MFA prompt, whatever the kind of the playbook requires. That's where, for me, that's what the definition of SOAR is, and where the sort of value lies in it.
Venkat, do you want to? Venkat, sorry.
Yes. Yeah. So let me look at SOAR in three perspectives, right? One is from the primarily from the analyst perspective, followed by the business perspective, and finally the engineering perspective. From the analyst perspective, say for the last 5 years, I spent a lot of my time sitting with the analyst, looking at the way he works, the kind of thought process that undergoes when an analyst works, right? The biggest thing I see is the SOC analyst has to focus on the investigation steps. I mean, that's what should be SOAR focus, right? Should look at exactly how do I respond to this alert in a much more effective way. But today, if you see the way the kind of the number of alerts, his focus is on more of fairly repetitive tasks, and which takes a lot of this bandwidth. So the focus is again lost on the core investigation that he's supposed to do. That is from the analyst perspective, right? The second part, which is from the business perspective, is two things. One is consistency and efficiency. The moment some of your processes are well established, then you get very consistent and repeatable, efficient responses. May not be true at all points, but at least for the typical alerts we see, you get consistency. The third part, if I look at it from the engineering perspective, is SOAR. Again, if you look at just the full form of SOAR, security orchestration, automation, and response, right? The key thing is the orchestration part. The orchestration part focuses primarily on processes, where some of your processes can be automated. Like, for example, the process like a set of workflow when a phishing attack happens. So that could be your process, whereas the automation would be purely against tasks. So I could have a task like creation of a ticket on ServiceNow, blocking a firewall, doing an incident enrichment on maybe an artifact or IOC gets enriched on through a virus total. So again, the orchestration focuses primarily on the process part of it. And the process, of course, do have tasks, whereas automation is purely towards tasks which can be automated with the help of integrations through APIs. So that's one part. Again, the last part is a response. So all of these things we do to get an effective response. Now, when responding to cyber incidents, I feel the key thing here is the context. The context is what probably as we go along the discussion, I'll walk through. So SOAR would help in responding to day-to-day typical regular events or alerts. But when it comes to a slightly larger complex, I feel the entire SOAR industry would be maturing over a period of time where it brings in the context and responds to a lot more complicated use cases.
So, okay, so here's a question for you guys, right? Because I think, first of all, I'm a big fan of SOAR, right? Because I view, orchestration automation is exactly how we scale security, right? I think a challenge on lots of security teams is that they don't have a good, mature process, and they don't have a good understanding of what they do. In fact, this is the same thing that happened in business when they tried to put the SAP and all that stuff, and then they blew up half the business because they couldn't understand, they didn't able to implement on it, right? So how much do you think having engineering capabilities in a security team, i.e. having developers and having people that can code, how much of that is important for then the implementation and the effectiveness of, basically of putting a SOAR platform, an effective SOAR platform in place?
Absolutely. It's bang on, because the biggest problem we see, I've been working with a lot of SOAR integrations. In fact, there's a myth that you deploy a SOAR and a lot of your things would get automated, right? So that's been the biggest myth all across. So what we have been trying to evangelize is even before you even think about a SOAR solution, ensure all your processes are well defined. I mean, you need to define all your use cases. What are the use cases that you need to build in your cyber resiliency, right? What are the set of use cases? Have your process well defined. These processes could again could change across your multiple business organizations, right? Different business units could have different variations. So primarily having your processes well defined is again, it's a base to even move towards the SOAR maturity model. In fact, if you look at the SOAR maturity model, which has recently been published, it clearly tells for a company to even look at SOAR, have your out-of-box baseline playbooks ready.
Yeah. And
I think it's a really good lesson for any sort of product. You've got to have the process beforehand. Products don't fix the process. But if you've got the process in place and you're overlaying the products, and particularly when you're designing the process, you can streamline it, remove the waste, etc., and then you start applying the technology. And it might not be that there's a SOAR platform that's the answer. It could be little piece of automation or integration between certain products that you might have already in place that actually make the life easier and the response more efficient.
Because generally what playbooks are nothing but an PO, like the processes converted into certain tasks, right? So if you have a process defined for say phishing or say ransomware or say any different kind of an attack in place, then only you will be able to convert these processes into playbooks, and hence you will be actually consuming the basic usage of any given SOAR technology or SOAR product.
So I would add that I think the SOAR industry is missing a couple of tricks, right? Because I think the SOAR industry is one of those industries that should really drive the need for security teams to be engineers, right? And I think that it's kind of happening, but it's one of those things that I don't think he has enough level of awareness, understanding for everybody in the industry, but also to large chunk of the security professionals. Because when you look at the best security teams in the planet, they all have engineering capabilities, right? I think there's no coincidence, right? That, I was in a panel a couple of months ago, and one guy presented a great thing, and the guy next to me was like, well, I run a massive security team, but I would love, I could do this. And I can't. And I'm like, well, you have massive budget, massive people. Why can't you do that? Blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, how many engineers you have on your team? 0. Like, well, there's your answer. It's like, that's why you can't do that, right? So I think the SOAR, which is all about orchestration, automation, right? I think they're missing a trick by not positioning, even the platform, even designing the platforms, that it's all about automation, right? It's all about, finding ways to automate stuff. And it could be little things, right? It could even be, like I said, it could be just a Jira ticket creation, could be a Slack channel creation, could be a connecting of the dots here, could be running a bit of Python to do this, running some reports. But it's almost like the real value of SOAR doesn't occur from the beginning. The real value of SOAR occurs when people are now thinking about or connecting the dots, are thinking about, when they do something manually, go, oh, I really can automate that. And then in their head, they go, okay, it's worth for me to spend the next 4 hours or 5 hours to implement the SOAR thing, because now I'll gain it back in the next year, right? Or I'll get it back in the next month or whatever week, right? So I think there's a positioning here that what this fundamentally is, when I saw SOAR, I said, yeah, cool, that could be almost like the development or the orchestration platform, right, for a security team. That if it's done correctly, it should be the place where you automate a lot of these things. But that means that you need to approach it from engineering. You need to have development, even if not full-time developers. The teams need to approach it from an engineering and a kind of a development, a customization point of view.
Absolutely.
I think absolutely. It's there. I think it must be a challenge, particularly for small organizations, less budget, and arguably as a consequence of that, less skilled, particularly for developers, that some of the really effective SOAR platforms, I know there's not everything, not all automation has to go through a platform, but it's codeless. It's following the playbook. It's block workflows, and I think that's where a lot of the value can come from, because it opens up the barriers to entry a lot less. It opens up the ability to automate to more people who are maybe less technical and don't have the capability to be coding, to be developers. And I think that's where you can have some good strengths actually for good solutions.
Yeah, I think because it takes time, right? With all the customers that we have seen in the last 4 years, you don't get to achieve the value of a SOAR in 15 days or in 1 month, because the actual automation value that you will get is compounded over a period of time, right? Exactly. First thing is that, and then secondly, you have to, and as a SOAR admin or as a SOAR user, you have to first understand what are the repetitive tasks that you currently are doing, and will this product be able to help me automate all those repetitive tasks, right? Yep. And those repetitive tasks can be one set of tasks, it can be one single task, which a SOAR can obviously automate to be executed in a scheduled or scheduled depending on the way the cases or the alerts or the incidents are being consumed, or depending on a certain time. So as a SOAR user, you have to first of all understand what can a SOAR product do for me, right? You have to understand the basic, like you have to be very clear on, which generally doesn't happen, by the way, we all know that. So we have to generally it happens that the teams have to work together in sync in order to understand what is it that they actually need, and how can we help them in achieving the potential that they can achieve using the SOAR product, right? So repetitive tasks or any standard procedures that they are following for any given set of tasks or any given set of incidents. So that's what is required to actually utilize the value of a SOAR platform.
Yeah. Deva, do you want to chip in with a question? I think you should be able to ask now. You have your hand up. Oh. All right. Oh, okay, so actually, you put the question here. So, see it's a junior security analyst. So, oh, can you? Yeah. So they're using McAfee SIEM for monitoring. So, do you have a specific question? Or well, let's see.
Yeah, yeah. Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear it.
Yes, sir. Firstly, I would like to thank to all for participating in this event. Recently, I'm a junior security analyst, present to be monitoring only some using SIM tool. So I'm really much interested to part of a SOAR parting, creating playbooks and run books. So can you give some basic examples for learning purpose in more to SOAR side?
So the question is, examples on how to create playbooks and how to start using playbooks.
Yeah. I heard by using regex or Python. By using regex commands, we can create a rules, correlation rules. Is there any other method to create by using SAM? I mean, easy way to create correlation rules for SOAR or even SIM also.
Yeah. So I would say that I think sometimes people overbake the beginning of playbooks, right? Playbook is just in a way should be a sequence of tasks that you follow, right? And I think sometimes we overbake this and we overcomplicate. But it should be an evolution, right? It should be an evolution. In fact, if you guys go into worldly maps, right, the playbook should basically be an evolution of things that you do from manual on the Genesis side all the way to productization and all the way to basically commodity that it becomes at the end. So I think it goes back to sometimes the problem is that teams are not disciplined enough to capture the playbooks, to capture the actions. So technically, you could do, it's almost like if you cannot do this stuff manually, right, you will always struggle to automate, right? And I feel that the more you can define the steps that you do, the more it's easy to find the bits that you can automate and the bits that it's almost like look for the points of highest leverage. That's how I think to think about this. Look at the places where you can automate a little bit. And every time you automate, you should be putting a platform in place. So some of the SOAR, basically it's called SOAR platforms, right? Some of them, they do give you a platform, which is basically what and you should be coding on top of it. But a lot of the playbooks, and there's some good examples out there, is that it's about the actions that you take. So you can do all this by yourself, right? You can even manually saying, this is the stuff I do. Like I'm a big fan of Jira because I think Jira allows you to create a set of tickets, to start to create a set of workflows where imagine a workflow where as something occurs and you have the 5 things you want to do straight away for that. And they could be Jira tickets, or it could be ServiceNow tickets, or it could be tickets in a particular platform. So it's all about defining what you want to do and then finding sweet spots where you can apply a bit of automation. And then if you already have a SOAR platform, it's about finding, coding on top of it, right? And I don't think you can get away with learning a bit of development. Although I would argue that when I say this, people think you need to be coding professional development. No, just about every security professional is a developer. They just don't think they are because they already connected the dots. But if you don't approach this from a point of view of you need to learn development skills, you need to learn how to code a bay, you need to start connecting the dots, there's a lot of stuff that you cannot do. So, any more advice, Venkat, Pratibha,
Yes.
Nick, on playbooks?
Yes. Anis, is it okay if I just walk through one slide?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. But by the time I bring up the slide, I also want to highlight one important fact here is, please note that simple Python coding is sometimes good enough for automation, right? I mean, if you look at Jira or ServiceNow or any ticketing system, they would definitely be exposing some of their APIs. And all we need to do, if you look at a little bit deeper, is you need to invoke these APIs using a curl call, right? You need to log into the Jira ticketing system. They would have provided an API for create a ticket or any other API, right? So, I mean, fundamentally, if you want to try out something, it's a lot easier, right? Okay, that is one part. Second thing is, I'll take this example here just for, again, to bring in, definitely this could be converted into wordly maps eventually. What I'm looking at a playbook is something simple steps. For example, in this case, right, what I'm here is a playbook representation on Kanban boards, could be on Jira or any other platform. But the thought process is we have steps for preparation when a phishing attack happens. Assume there's a phishing email detected as an alert. So you need to have steps for preparation, which you do before getting the alert. Then you do some kind of a triage or identification, like steps for get original email, get the original email, then with headers, check. So these are all your steps. Each of the steps you define verbally, and then check on, say, virus total. So you're defining a process here, and some of your process or tasks can be automated. So you tell, okay, I want to automate this particular task. Same way for remediation, right? So if you look at from SOAR perspective, two things. One is incident enrichment part, where or incident betterment of it, right, is this part of it. Whereas remediation is where you want to take some response. I mean, you want to do some response where, again, the context would be key.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, so the summary is you can always try out automation using simple Python scripts.
Yeah, and that's a great example, right? Can you bring back the what's it called, the GitHub?
Yes. Oh, the GitHub. Okay. Let me go to the GitHub again.
Yeah, but you can see that here, you can do this with a Kanban board. You can do this on paper, right? You can do this as a sequence of events. I guess, the question is, how are you capturing the steps? And one of the things that I always find that sometimes is good is to go slow to go fast. So for example, like when you have incidents, sometimes just having a log of the actions you've done, even if it's just a Word document, screenshot, I looked this, I did that, I did this, I did that, that helps a lot. Because it's sort of like, it means that although you don't go on all these tangents, you're keeping track of it. And because ultimately what you want is to be able to go back and then ask yourself the question, did we did the right thing at the right time, right? What was the sequence of events? And I think, a lot of the platforms, the challenge is you need a level of maturity in order to automate. So even if you can just automate one small part of here, that's already a big win, right? So if you show that GitHub repository, it's a good example of the kind of stuff that, every one of these little things helps, right? So in a way, even like, for example, this, if you end up having a collection of these scripts, is powerful because, basically what you're doing here, you're starting to automate your actions, like, disable AWS user account, right? So anything that you can do in a manual way, you can then start to put on these scripts, because that makes life easier when you're looking at connecting the dots in a bigger sense, right? So if you just walk us through this, because I think this is a good example of where you should start, right?
Yes. Luckily, Dinis, just to add to this, you can see the number of playbooks being available. It's huge. I mean, you can just going through some of the playbooks is a good example. I mean, you can see hundreds of them available on GitHub.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great place to start, right? And it makes a big difference. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it looks really good. And I think as we've done something like this in the past, what we've always had to be wary of is, particularly when you start getting into the rules and triggers, and going back to Dennis's point about keeping the playbook live and being able to adapt is really every time you make an automated action, there's a degree of risk in there. You're either creating more false positives because you've set it too low, or you're actually going to create a false negative because you set it too high. And are you comfortable with that? And how do you try and sort of engineer out the opportunity to get it wrong? And it's a really fine balance to walk. But being able to keep track of the output of the playbooks and keep reviewing them, don't leave them alone and pretend they're automating it all night and letting you sleep. But you got to come back in the morning and check that actually what came in the pipeline at the beginning was correct at the end, and keep validating it and keep updating as you go. And it might be business appetite. Maybe you want virus total 1, or maybe you want virus total 10. It kind of depends where you draw that line.
And every incident is an opportunity to validate your assumptions, right? So if you think about it, if you got a playbook wrong, eventually you should have incidents. You should have things that occurred, and you go, well, hold on, how come that wasn't picked up over there, right? And that's why I feel a lot of these things, the challenge is to start, right? The challenge is, how do you solve a little bit of the problem? How do you move the needle on the path of automation? And that's why, go back, I think a lot of the SOAR platforms, I think, it should be easier to start. It should be easy to do small little things, right? It should be easy to basically be in a position where, okay, I'm just going to, like the phishing example, you say, I'm going to just do this little bit here, or I'm just going to automate this AWS little bit there, right? And that is changing the culture, right? Is the most difficult thing. And because the end goal, I think we can all agree, everybody wants a single pane of glass. Everybody wants the fully integrated bit, right? The problem is most teams are not even on a direction to get there, because they're not really, in the process of writing little bits of automation. Because because when they are, basically you start to talk like an engineering team. You start thinking about version control, you start thinking about QA, you start thinking about testing, you start thinking about processes, you start thinking about, feature requests and user stories. But that's how it should be, right? Because basically this is an engineering function, right? I think in security sometimes we treat this very cavalier, but if you take a step back, right, this is a development platform for the security team. We call it SOAR, but what it fundamentally is a development, orchestration, but it's a development platform for the security team to connect dots, right? And if the dots are connected automatically, awesome, right? When that works, it's great, right? When freaking Splunk can consume data from here, and when Elastic can get data from there, and Chronicle or whatever, right? When they connect the dots and tens and all this, that's beautiful, right? The problem is in the real world, we have tons and tons and tons of processes that we need to connect the dots. And I think that's the bit that we really need to get in a good place.
And there's two parts of that. One, in starting small, definitely. Like when we did automation around the phishing, we actually didn't automate the threats. What we automated were the false positives, the emails that came in from HR that people reported in, the spam. That's what we automated away. That was low risk, and that was taking all the time. So the analysts could then focus on the threats that came through, and then we could change around the parameters. So that's one thing there. And then what you're saying, Dinis. So I can't remember where you're going. But anyway, yeah. So that starting small was really key.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what, right? So you have to understand the process first, right? Mm-hmm. And instead of again thinking of it will reduce all your problems and it will automate everything that you're currently doing, is not going to happen as soon as you're going to deploy any sort of platform in your infrastructure, right? So you have to take the baby steps. You have to understand what is it that can be automated and what is it that cannot be automated, right? Or how would you actually do the automation process?
Yeah, and that's why picking small examples I think are very powerful, right? Like, look, and I'm a big fan of sometimes using incidents as a way to get stuff done, because doing an incident, there's awareness, like something failed, there's a big gap in there, right? And if during an incident you can automate a small part, or you can improve this bit, then you start to be embedded, right? I think a lot of these things in security, we have such a bar of entry to start to add value, where ultimately, if you automate something, you should start to add value reasonably quickly, because there should also be a compound effect, right? Everything you automate should make you a little bit better. So when I develop technology, there's a moment that I love, which is the fact that the more I do it, the more productive I become, because I'm building more and more tools that I get to use. But sometimes if you don't get this right, the more technology you use, the slower you go, because everything is interconnected. So I think SOAR has that capability that, we really need to be, take it to the next level. And if you look at the amount of security tools, the amount of complexity that we have in a business, right, there's a great opportunity for security to be an orchestrator into a lot of these.
Right.
And then delegate to the business, right? We orchestrate, but then we delegate to the business, but we connect the dots. Sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah, and using the data around the instance can be really powerful, because sometimes it's not even the big instance, it's the small ones. How many of those small ones are coming in every day that take up your time, and focus on that? So I'm sure people watching will have faster speed of light travel alerts that come in, and it's always 99% somebody's coming on the VPN, and then they've come in normally and they get the MFA prompt. So how about if that's the most common incident that's taking your time, how about automating that out? Send another MFA prompt to the user, problem goes away. Things like that, you can really sort of drive some of those noisy tickets away, and then you can focus on the really big stuff.
Now here's the interesting thing, right? What's your view of the impact of AI technology like ChatGPT, whether it's like that or equivalent? We definitely crossed the line, right? We definitely now have technology that, look, I would argue that even in cybersecurity, we talk about AI, there's nothing like this thing, right? So now we got for real, whether it's ChatGPT or the version of Google, the version of Amazon, whatever, we're definitely at the point where we now start to have technology that can give a lot of context. Now, I think in a SOAR world, this is a crazy opportunity, because you still need orchestration, you still need automation, you still need this. But what I think we can get now is a lot better context.
Yes,
exactly. So that's what I was thinking, today, that if somehow I'm able to include the chat GPT into my UI, right, and using the APIs that it supports. So currently, one is the user experience, right? Because that's also important when you have to use any tool for that matter, right?
Yeah. So
currently, when the user comes in, he just clicks. He is performing on a dumb machine. But then when if I just include a chat GPT into my SOAR, then he should be first able to be. He's talking to not to a robot, like not a chatbot, but he's talking to an AI, right? Which is a lot different than chatting with a bot. That's number one. Yeah. Second is if I'm able to kind of expose some of my data to the chat GPT once it is combined, then it can actually, as an analyst, I can come in and I can, just relay the message to the chat GPT that what are the new alerts with higher priority and this severity, which you can, that you can see in for this tenant, right? So I don't have to do anything at all. I'm just talking to my chat GPT and it is giving me all the information that I need. Yeah. Right. So,
and I think you guys also, the industry had to be careful, right? Because if whoever builds, if the industry doesn't react, I can totally see how a chat GPT powered becomes a better SOAR than anything that's out there, because he has the context, right? He just needs to know how to connect the dots, right? So I think it's an interesting moment where, it's not about one versus the other, that who actually can use, that kind of technology to become better, so that you have the extra context that is, domain specific, which is what we are. We provide domain specific understanding of how these things work together.
So how do we get something like that to consider your own unique business context, your own organization, and you've got particular rules and policies and how you behave, and then what ChatGPT thinks or its reference point is something possibly different, and how do we rationalize?
How much have you experienced ChatGPT in terms of briefing, and Nick, how much have you played with it?
Yeah, and in terms of firing questions in.
No, about providing context.
I've seen where even on an Excel, on a spreadsheet, you can give it different parameters and it kind of then gives you certain answers, but not from a kind of.
So one of the things I found more impressive, and I saw a couple of videos, and one of the ones that for me struck the chord more was what the guy was saying. The thing about ChatGPT is that the more context you give it, the better it is. So it's almost like, it's almost like it's worse. And this, I guess the answer to your question is, even with technology today, if you would seed it with, 1, 2, 3, even like a 50-page document that gives you context, right? Given the state of that technology, it will start to give you insane answers, right? The problem at the moment is the UI is a bit limited, right? In that, but even there, its ability to process data, I think the more you can give it context, the better it provides information. So imagine a world where you actually describe, this is my landscape, this is what we have, this is the thing, this is the stuff, these are limitations. Now, what should I do on this case? I think that technology is very close to provide really, really meaningful answers. And I think the new, again, generation of SOAR technology need to embrace this, because again, this is all about automation, and this and ChatGPT represents the next evolution of automation and context, which is pretty insane. So you're going to add ChatGPT to your product?
I think so.
That's interesting security considerations, right? Now,
Yeah.
sharing data with it. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see if they can create ways where the data also is harbored, right? Because at the end, the problem is that we want to make sure there's also clear governance, right, on the data, right? Which is going to be a limitation of it, right? So, yeah. That's
I had a use case where so I had to give a ransomware playbook and a data lost on dark web playbook to a client. So one of the things we did was give me playbook for ransomware attack playbook, give me playbook for dark web data leak. Then we had to compare and kind of show him, okay, we have enough substantial points over it.
Yeah, but you can see that even those playbooks, like the more context that technology has, the better it can provide, right? Because you almost want playbooks that are in context to where you are, what platforms you have available, that jazz. So. Yes. Cool. All right. Getting top of the hour. So any final thoughts? Any final comments you guys want to make?
I think the consensus was get your processes sorted, then start automating. Start small, build on it, adapt.
Pratibha, Venkat, any final thoughts?
I'll say, go ahead, Venkat.
Yeah, so just to add to it, one of the last thought I have is the SOAR fundamentally has a concept of benefit regret metrics, which clearly tells most of your SOAR can be done before you even look at all the low regret tasks, especially, for example, if you want to quarantine a machine, and if you bring in the context of if it's HR machine, right, or if it's a server machine. So focus on the low regret, less risk tasks to begin with. It's easier to build that confidence, and overall the journey becomes a lot more smoother when you start looking at very small, very low risk items.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll say that we have to understand before deploying SOAR, what are the current processes which are there, right? And then how can I, as a user, how do I break those processes? And then probably that's number one. And secondly, we need to understand that I might not be able to retrieve or get the entire benefit from SOAR from the starting point. It will take at least 1 quarter or so, so as to completely being able to utilize the productivity enhancement that a SOAR provides, right? So first is dividing your tasks into certain groups, and then creating playbooks, being able to first of all understand what are the current processes, then convert them into playbooks, and then the reports and everything else is a next step when it comes to use and automate the things which are currently there. So you need to understand what is it that you need to automate.
Yeah, absolutely. Deva, do you have a question or a comment that you want to make at the end? You had your hand up. maybe it was from before. All right, I think we'll wrap it up then. And thanks for everybody, and let's do a couple more panels at the next one.
Thank you
You've
so
been
much.
really good.
Thank
Good
you
evening,
so
everyone.
much. Thank you, Nick.
So much.